Sometimes they can be a good singer and be like the Dickens out.
No.
I'm just getting tired of hearing it because I've heard it enough, and I'm sick of it.
Loretta Lynn wasn't just a country star. She was the queen of country, a pioneer who told it like it was. But behind the rhinestones and twang, she had feuds, rivalries, and grudges. Today, we uncover the shocking truth. The five singers Loretta Lynn admitted she couldn't stand. When people remember Loretta Lynn, they often think of the smiling coal miner's daughter, the woman who sang about real life in plain-spoken language. She was warm, funny, and unapologetically honest. But to understand her career, you have to understand something else. Loretta Lynn lived through one of the most competitive and cutthroat eras in country music history. And while fans adored her, backstage in Nashville was a battlefield where rivalries were as fierce as the rhinestones on the Opry stage. The 1960s and 70s were the golden age of country music, but they weren't easy years for women in the business. Most of Nashville's industry leaders were men, and the system was stacked against female performers. Record labels often signed just one or two women per roster. Radio stations played mostly male voices, and award shows favored established stars over newcomers. For Loretta Lynn, an unpolished working-class woman from Butcher Hollow, Kentucky, breaking into that system was like storming a castle with no invitation. Her background alone made her an outsider. Unlike many of her peers, Loretta didn't come from Nashville society, nor did she have industry connections. She came from a coal mining family, married at 15, and raised children before she ever set foot on a stage. When she finally did, she sang songs drawn directly from her life, songs about marriage, poverty, motherhood, and cheating husbands. It was bold, raw, and unlike anything Nashville had heard from a woman before. That authenticity earned her fans across the country, but it also created tension with other singers who were playing by the industry's old rules. Loretta Lynn's rise was meteoric. By the early 60s, she was landing hits with songs like Success and Wine, Women, and Song. But it was when she started writing her own material, especially songs like Don't Come Home A-Drinkin', with Lovin' on Your Mind, that she truly shook Nashville to its core. For the first time, a woman was singing about telling her husband no. She was calling out infidelity. She was demanding respect, and not everyone liked it. Some singers found Loretta's honesty refreshing. Others thought it was too abrasive, even threatening. Country music at that time was supposed to be polite, especially when it came from women. Loretta was anything but polite. She was real. And realness in Nashville was a weapon that could cut both ways. Competition among female artists was especially intense. There weren't many slots on the radio or on the Grand Ole Opry stage, and every woman was fighting for her place. Tammy Wynette, Patsy Cline, Dolly Parton, Tanya Tucker, the list of female stars who rose during that period is legendary. But with that much talent packed into one industry, friendships could turn to rivalries in an instant. Loretta herself admitted that she was no stranger to conflict. She loved deeply, but she also fought hard. In interviews, she spoke openly about singers she clashed with, and unlike many stars who kept their opinions private, Loretta didn't bite her tongue. She wasn't afraid to say who rubbed her the wrong way, and while fans cherished her honesty, her fellow singers sometimes resented it. It's important to remember that Loretta's rivalries weren't always about personal hatred. Often they were about survival in a business that pitted women against one another. One singer's radio play could mean another's silence. One artist's award could mean another's snub. When Loretta Lynn walked into Nashville, she wasn't just competing against men, she was competing against every other woman fighting for the same small piece of spotlight. But what made Loretta unique was her willingness to fight on her own terms. She didn't conform to Nashville's polished image. She didn't soften her songs to make them more acceptable. She didn't apologize for her opinions. And that boldness created natural friction with singers who preferred to play it safe. Fans saw her as the queen of country, but behind closed doors, she could be polarizing. Some singers resented her outspokenness, others envied her success, and still others just didn't get along with her personality. Loretta was fiercely loyal to her friends, but just as fierce against her enemies. By the time she became the first woman to win Entertainer of the Year at the CMA Awards in 1972, she had already stepped on more than a few toes. Nashville respected her, but Nashville also feared her. Because unlike many who played the game, Loretta didn't. She brought her Kentucky fire to every room she entered, and that made her unforgettable and controversial. In many ways, those rivalries helped fuel her success. Every feud, every side-eyed remark, every piece of gossip only added to her legend. Loretta Lynn wasn't just another pretty face in a sequined dress. She was a fighter. And in the golden age of Nashville, fighters weren't always liked, but they were always remembered. This set the stage for the next chapter of her career. The names. The singers who went from colleagues to competitors, from competitors to enemies, and in some cases, to the people Loretta Lynn openly admitted she couldn't stand. Because for the Queen of Country, honesty wasn't optional. It was her brand. And when Loretta didn't like someone, she made sure the world knew. If Chapter 1 showed us the cutthroat nature of Nashville's golden age, Chapter 2 takes us inside the personal conflicts that defined Loretta Lynn's career. On stage, country. Singers smiled, shook hands, and called each other family. But behind closed doors, rivalries often turned friendships into bitter enmities. And Loretta, outspoken as ever, found herself at the heart of more than a few of those clashes. One of the most talked about rivalries was between Loretta and Tammy Wynette, the woman behind Stand By Your Man. On the surface, the two had a lot in common. They were both strong female voices who dominated the charts during the same era. But that similarity was exactly what drove a wedge between them. Tammy's image was carefully crafted: polished hair, glamorous outfits, and songs that portrayed women as loyal, even submissive. Loretta, on the other hand, was raw, earthy, and unafraid to call out bad husbands. The tension between the two wasn't just artistic, it was personal. Loretta once admitted she didn't care much for Tammy's brand of music, seeing it as the opposite of what she herself stood for. Tammy, in turn, reportedly saw Loretta as too brash, too unrefined for the image Nashville wanted to project. While they remained cordial in public, those who knew them said their backstage interactions could be icy at best. Then there was Tanya Tucker, the fiery teenager who stormed into country music with Delta Dawn. Loretta was already an established star when Tanya arrived on the scene, and at first she welcomed the newcomer. But Tanya's rebellious streak, her hard-living image, and her rapid rise through the ranks rubbed some traditionalists the wrong way, including Loretta. Loretta once commented that Tanya's behavior off-stage overshadowed her talent, a remark that reportedly got back to Tanya and sparked years of tension. The two women eventually reconciled later in life, but during the height of their careers, the rivalry was no secret. Another singer who clashed with Loretta was Jean Shepard, a fellow Opry member known for her traditional honky-tonk sound. Shepard had been in the business longer, and she wasn't shy about defending the old ways of country music. Loretta, with her bold lyrics about birth control and cheating, represented a newer, edgier voice. Shepard criticized Loretta for pushing boundaries too far, while Loretta dismissed Shepard as out of touch with what audiences wanted. The divide between them was emblematic of the generational battle within country music at the time. Even Loretta's friendships sometimes turned sour. Take Patsy Cline, one of Loretta's closest friends and mentors. The two were inseparable, until Patsy's tragic death in 1963. While their relationship was mostly loving, there were moments of jealousy and competition even between them. Patsy had the bigger voice, the more glamorous career at the time, while Loretta was still clawing her way up. Loretta later admitted that she sometimes felt overshadowed by Patsy, and that dynamic could have grown into a rivalry if fate hadn't intervened. Instead, Patsy's death only deepened Loretta's respect and gratitude, leaving behind a what-if story that fans still speculate about. Perhaps the most surprising rift came with Dolly Parton. For years, fans assumed the two queens of country were close friends. After all, they were often compared. Both wrote their own songs, both came from humble beginnings, and both became global icons. But in reality, Loretta and Dolly's relationship was complicated. Dolly was known for her diplomacy, always smiling and avoiding direct criticism. Loretta, by contrast, spoke her mind without a filter. While there was no explosive feud, there was a quiet distance between them. Loretta once hinted that Dolly's carefully managed image felt too Hollywood for her taste, while Dolly sidestepped questions about Loretta's bluntness. What all these relationships showed was that Loretta Lynn wasn't afraid of conflict. If she didn't like someone, she said so. If she felt another singer was phony, she let the world know. And while that honesty earned her enemies, it also made her real in a way few stars dared to be. Fans loved her for it. They knew that when Loretta spoke, she wasn't sugarcoating anything, but the rivalries weren't just about egos. They were about survival. Every chart position, every award, every Opry invitation meant money, fame, and respect. In an industry where women were given limited opportunities, competition was inevitable. And Loretta Lynn, who had fought her way from poverty to the top of the charts, wasn't about to step aside for anyone. Still, these feuds came with a price. Some doors in Nashville closed to Loretta because she wouldn't play nice. Some singers refused to collaborate with her, and some critics painted her as difficult. But Loretta never apologized. She believed that telling the truth, even if it hurt, was more important than keeping the peace. And that's what leads us to the heart of this story. The 5 names Loretta Lynn openly admitted she couldn't stand. The singers whose personalities, styles, or choices clashed so deeply with her own that she simply called it like she saw it. In a world of carefully managed PR, Loretta Lynn stood alone as the woman unafraid to name names. Loretta Lynn wasn't the kind of star to hide her feelings. When she liked you, she embraced you like family. When she didn't, well, she made. That just as clear. Unlike many Nashville singers who kept rivalries secret, Loretta sometimes put her dislike on record, bluntly naming those she couldn't stand. Over the years, fans pieced together her comments, her interviews, and her stories. And while hate might be a strong word, there were 5 singers Loretta Lynn made no secret of resenting. The feud between Loretta and Tammy Wynette was legendary. Tammy, with her polished image and the anthem Stand By Your Man, represented a very different vision of womanhood than Loretta. Where Tammy sang about loyalty to a husband no matter what, Loretta wrote songs about kicking a drunk husband out of bed. The two women were often placed in direct competition, especially in award shows and radio play. Loretta once dismissed Tammy's music as too soft, while Tammy allegedly saw Loretta as unrefined and too blunt for Nashville's image. Their rivalry never turned into an all-out war, but the disdain was obvious. To Loretta, Tammy represented everything she didn't want women in country music to be: quiet, submissive, and controlled by men. When Tanya Tucker exploded onto the scene with Delta Dawn at just 13 years old, the industry crowned her a prodigy. But her wild streak, hard, partying, public romances, and rebellion soon became as famous as her music. Loretta, who had clawed her way through the business while raising 6 children, didn't have patience for what she saw as reckless behavior. Loretta reportedly told friends and journalists that Tanya was wasting her gift by letting drama overshadow her career. Tanya, in turn, didn't take kindly to Loretta's criticism. Their feud simmered for years, flaring up in gossip columns and backstage whispers. Though they softened toward each other later in life, Loretta made it clear during Tanya's heyday that she didn't respect the way the younger star carried herself. Jean Shepherd was already a Grand Ole Opry star when Loretta Lynn came on the scene. Shepherd was fiercely protective of pure country music and often criticized singers she thought were pushing the genre too far. Loretta, with her bold songs about birth control, cheating, and women standing up to men, clashed directly with Shepherd's conservative view of what female singers should represent. Shepherd once criticized Loretta in interviews, saying her songs were too modern and not fit for the Opry. Loretta, never one to back down, fired back by saying Shepherd was stuck in the past. The two never reconciled, and their feud became a symbol of Nashville's internal battle between tradition and progress. Not all of Loretta's enemies were women. Farron Young, the hillbilly heartthrob, had a reputation for being brash, flirtatious, and often disrespectful toward women in the industry. Loretta, who had dealt with sexism her whole career, wasn't afraid to stand up to him. The two clashed repeatedly, both on the Opry stage and backstage. Farron was known for making crude remarks, and Loretta called him out more than once, saying he didn't treat women right. Farron, in turn, mocked her songs and even dismissed her. CMA wins as undeserved. Their dislike for each other was no secret, and Loretta herself admitted in later years that Farron was one of the few male singers she just plain hated. Now this one might surprise fans. Dolly Parton and Loretta Lynn were often grouped together as country's two queens, but in reality their relationship was more complicated. While they were never openly hostile, Loretta occasionally hinted that she didn't trust Dolly's polished, carefully managed image. Loretta prided herself on being unfiltered, while Dolly built a career on diplomacy, always smiling, never speaking ill of others, and crafting an almost mythic public persona. Loretta once suggested that Dolly was too Hollywood and not as authentic as she appeared. Dolly, for her part, avoided fanning the flames, but the quiet distance between them was obvious. For Loretta, Dolly was less of a personal enemy and more of a symbol of everything she disliked about Nashville's growing obsession with image over honesty. The common thread, what united all 5 of these rivalries, was Loretta Lynn's refusal to play the game. She wasn't interested in being polite just for appearances. If she felt another singer was fake, reckless, or harmful to women, she said so. And while these rivalries sometimes hurt her in the industry, closing doors, sparking gossip, they also defined her as a truth-teller. Fans loved her for it. They knew that if Loretta Lynn said she hated someone, it wasn't a publicity stunt. It was the raw honesty of a woman who built her life on telling it like it is. In the end, Loretta's feuds were never just about personal dislike. They were about values, about what she believed country music should represent, and how women should be treated within it. For every singer she resented, there were dozens she admired. But she wasn't afraid to admit that some simply didn't deserve her respect, and that brutal honesty, more than anything, made Loretta Lynn unforgettable. By now, it's clear that Loretta Lynn was never afraid to speak her mind. She named names, drew lines in the sand, and stood her ground in an industry where women were expected to smile politely and say nothing controversial. But here's the fascinating part. Those very feuds, the names she dropped, the rivalries she fueled, the bitterness she sometimes carried, didn't tarnish her career. They strengthened it. They helped build the unshakable legacy of one of country music's greatest icons. Let's be honest. Country music, like any entertainment industry, thrives on conflict. Fans love to debate who's better, who's more authentic, and who deserves the crown. In the 1960s and 70s, Loretta Lynn provided plenty of fuel for those debates. By openly clashing with singers like Tammy Wynette or Tanya Tucker, she gave audiences a front-row seat to real, unscripted drama. And unlike many of her rivals, Loretta's honesty came across as refreshing. not manufactured. She wasn't stirring the pot for headlines. She was telling her truth, plain and simple. One reason these feuds actually cemented her legacy is because they highlighted Loretta's authenticity. She was never afraid of losing fans by saying what she thought. When she criticized Tanya Tucker for being reckless or called out Gene Shepard for being stuck in the past, she risked alienating powerful allies in Nashville. But her core fans, the working-class women who saw themselves in her songs, respected her even more. They saw a woman who refused to bow down to anyone, no matter how famous. In a way, her feuds made her a folk hero for truth-telling in an industry built on illusions. Another factor was how these rivalries shaped the storytelling of her career. Every feud added a new layer of drama to the Loretta Lynn myth. She wasn't just the girl from Butcher Hollow who became a star. She was the fighter who stood toe-to-toe with Nashville's most powerful voices and never blinked. Her fans didn't just follow her music, they followed her battles. And those battles became part of her legend. But perhaps the most important legacy of Loretta's feuds is how they underscored her role as a trailblazer for women in country music. Nashville in the mid-20th century was dominated by men, male executives, male songwriters, male stars. Female singers were often expected to fall in line, smile, and be grateful for whatever scraps of attention they got. Loretta Lynn refused. When a male singer like Farron Young belittled women, she called him out. When Tammy Wynette preached submission, Loretta sang about divorce and birth control. And when Dolly Parton perfected her Hollywood image, Loretta doubled down on her working-class authenticity. Every conflict was a battle not just for her own respect, but for the respect of women in country music as a whole. Critics sometimes accused Loretta of being difficult or divisive, but history has proven otherwise. Those who once dismissed her as a troublemaker now see her as a pioneer. By refusing to play nice all the time, she carved out space for future female artists to be bold, honest, and unapologetic. You can draw a straight line from Loretta Lynn to singers like Miranda Lambert, Casey Musgraves, and even Taylor Swift, women who built their careers on refusing to stay silent. What's remarkable is that, in the end, Loretta outlasted almost all of her rivals. Many of the singers she clashed with faded from the charts or were remembered mainly for a single hit. Loretta, on the other hand, kept winning awards, selling out concerts, and releasing music well into her later years. Her feuds might have been intense, but they didn't define her negatively. They added fuel to the fire that kept her career burning. And here's the irony. Some of those feuds ended up evolving into mutual respect. Tanya Tucker, once the rebellious teenager,